Texas isn't just a state, it's a state of mind, reflecting every part of the American experience. Today's guest is Texas Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, a former news and sports broadcaster and talk radio icon who's fundamentally changing Texas from property tax relief and school choice to drawing a very bright line at the southern border. Armed at all times with three of the most powerful weapons known to man: faith, fortitude, and common sense. From Ballard Studios in Washington, D.C., a very special episode of 13th and Park.
The hard things that are necessary, we either do it or we'll pay the price down the road.
That often is missing in politics.
We have to solve everything.
It's a nightmare.
You and I can differ, but that doesn't mean you and I cannot be friends.
I have faith in the American people.
Those are the facts.
The Illuminati, right there. Aliens could have invaded and nothing would surprise me at this point.
We went from North Korea to M&M. That's a lot, man.
What's in this tea?
Well, Lieutenant Governor, great to have you today from Austin. We were hoping you would be right next to us, actually in studio yesterday, but as you know, a day in Washington, D.C. is, if nothing else, unpredictable.
Yes, and I always prefer to do it in studio. You know, my background is radio and television. It's always good to have the guest in front of you.
Right.
So I understand, but it was a full day. I got to the White House around 8 a.m. and left late in the day around dinner time as the president was getting ready to wing his way to Alabama to give the commencement speech at the graduation. So we spent all day in the White House. It was a great day.
But you were here because you were being named the chairman by the
Yes.
president of the Religious Liberty Commission. Tell us about that.
So after the election in November, the president and I were talking about a number of issues, and we began talking about religious liberty. And he was very gracious, and he said this was Dan's idea. It was really our idea together, but he was very gracious, as he is. And the whole purpose of this, is to help educate people in America who really don't even know where and when they can pray. The rules are different in every school district, in every county, in every state, and some federal government rules that we have to address. So we're going to take, we have a schedule of somewhere between 6 and 9 hearings over the next year, and we will take specific issues to examine where people's rights are being infringed upon, no matter their faith. I mean, we're primarily a Christian nation based on the Christian Judeo ethic, as I said in my remarks yesterday. But this is for all faiths, for religious freedom. But obviously, a lot of it centers around attacks on Christians by the Biden administration for 4 years. As I said yesterday, we have this magnificent inheritance of religious liberty in this country, and it has been chipped and chipped and chipped away over time. And no one should come between God and a believer or those seeking to find God, no matter, again, what their faith is. And that's what this is about. It was a great honor, by the way. It was a great honor for me. I grew up in inner city Baltimore. I've been in Texas now for 42 years, but I grew up in the Highland town in Baltimore back in the 50s. And I checked it on the trip. It was about 46 miles from my marble-stepped, 12-foot wide house that I grew up in to the Rose Garden. And I sat there kind of overwhelmed by the moment. How did this kid get from inner city Baltimore, almost 50 miles down the road to the Rose Garden, to be able to stand next to a president and speak to millions of people? It's rather overwhelming, and it's only God can make those things happen.
Well, let me take you back to Baltimore. And I'm a Baltimore native as well. So
I could tell in the accent. I knew it the minute we started talking. So what part of town?
Just outside of Towson.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So Highlandtown, I know very, very well. I know East Baltimore very, very well, where you came from. I read a lot about your background, your family history, how your mom was a bookkeeper, your dad, Charles, ex-Marine, worked for the Baltimore Sun.
Neither graduated from high school because that was what the 40s were about. He got a letter from my grandmother so he could join the Marines at 17. And when he came back, he never finished school. My mom went to work in an aircraft factory, Martin Marietta, and never went back to school. She moved from Virginia up to Baltimore during the war where all the jobs were. But they were both really smart. I was an only child, so I was spoiled. I had a lot of time to be around adults when you're an only child. And so my upbringing was great. They worked hard, and I'm proud of them. They both passed now, but I'm so proud of them. But a kid from that side of town with parents who hadn't finished high school to get to the Rose Garden, not on my bucket list, wasn't my plan, but somehow or another, God charted the path.
And I know you still honor both of them. I think you still have your dad's old flannel shirt very close by.
Well, you did good research. It's hanging in the closet.
Yeah, I understand. I totally get that. What I don't understand, though, is after the Baltimore Colts, Johnny Unitas and John Mackey and Boyd, all these incredible Hall of Famers, you ended up a Packers fan out of all that. How do you explain that?
Well, no. That must have been a bio typo somewhere.
Okay, good.
So I love football, but to this day, look, I'm a big Cowboys fan. I'm a Texans fan.
Sure.
I love my Texas teams. But when Rosenblum got the Mayflower truck and backed up all the equipment in the middle of the night and took off, one of the greatest attacks on fans in the history of sports, I think, because the Baltimore Colt fans and let's go, you Baltimore Colts, and get the ball across the
marching
line.
band, right? Oh, yeah.
We all know the song.
Oh, yeah.
And it was who we were. Maybe the confusion, someone wrote something, AI maybe doesn't get it all right all the time, is that there's kind of Green Bay and Baltimore were similar. And of course, they played each other in some big games.
Big ones.
Because they're really little towns. Baltimore was a small town, and you could go to the local, there was a bar on every corner, like in Milwaukee or up there in Green Bay. And the fans were so connected, and to steal the team away, it was just gut wrenching. And I was actually a bat boy for the Orioles one day when I was 12, which was a great experience. So no, big sports fan back then. I was a sportscaster, before the other Dan Patrick came along. But I still think the Colts have the best looking uniforms, probably along with the Cowboys.
Anyone that's read into your bio, they understand how you come through the ranks of journalism. You started off in a TV station in Scranton, as you know, the WTTG in Washington. You made your way ultimately to Texas, became one of the best-known sportscasters in the state of Texas for KHOU. You bled blue at one point, I think, donning the blue colors for the Oilers. And then, of course, you became a radio icon. As a conservative talk show host, it has to be compared to Rush Limbaugh. You had such impact and appeal, and you did through all those years. How did that enable you to better understand and connect with real people and what they really feel and what they really want and what they really need?
When I was in Scranton, I was only there in that small market for 6 months when the news director of WTTG back in the late 70s was, I think, skiing in the Poconos and saw me and offered me the job. And I came down, interviewed, and I didn't do very well. He said, "You're not the same guy I saw in Scranton. You were having fun. You're not having fun here." Part of that was I had 2 producers. I didn't want people to write things for me. I wanted to do it myself. But he said something I've never forgotten, and it's played well in politics. He said, "Dan, don't tell me what happened in the game." He said, "I want you to imagine you're walking into a bar and someone says, 'Hey, Dan, what happened to the game tonight?' And how would you talk to that guy at the bar? You wouldn't kind of go point by point, say, 'Man, you can't believe the 7th inning. Brooks Robinson came up.
There you go.
Hit a ball off the wall, scored 2. Right. That's how you would tell the story. And talk to people, not at people. In my remarks at the Rose Garden, I was quite nervous. I'm standing next to the president. You don't want to get anything wrong. The White House staff is listening to every word. God's listening to every word. After all, you're talking about Jesus and religious liberty and faiths of all types. But just talk to people, speak from the heart, and just let it roll. But Rush Limbaugh's part in this is that I bought this little radio station that was bankrupt, and a guy named Rush Limbaugh called. He couldn't get on the radio anywhere because he was talking about politics and God. And in those days, talk radio was about ask the doctor, ask the lawyer, what'd you do on your summer vacation? What's your favorite recipe? Don't get controversial. And he was the Babe Ruth of talk show host. He saved AM radio, and he really saved the conservative movement or lit a fire under it, which still burns today. And I wouldn't be lieutenant governor without Rush Limbaugh, because he took our 40th ranked station. Literally, when I bought it, it was 40 out of 40 in Houston. And in 3 months, we were number 1 between 11 and 2 when he was on. And we stayed friends. He elevated me to where I then switched from doing sports talk to political talk back in the mid 90s. And I had this great lead in. So that's kind of how all that happened. But I would not be lieutenant governor today without Rush Limbaugh.
That's high praise. And he was that kind of talent, as you know.
He was that kind of talent.
So let's advance. So you ran successfully for the state Senate. You've been lieutenant governor ever since 2015. If you look at the Texas Constitution, as I know you're a student of, Article 4, Sections 1 and 16, kind of define what a lieutenant governor does in Texas. And it's unusual and different than I think any other lieutenant governor in the country. You are not only the presiding officer with full powers, as you may say, in the state Senate. You appoint all committee chairs. You sit at kind of the head of the budget committee. I think that's a very important thing as you start dispersing government funds. Now that you're, 10 years in and you're seeking reelection again, what do you want your legacy to read like when it's all said and done?
My favorite song by Casting Crowns is Only Jesus. I don't want to build a legacy. I don't want them to remember me, only Jesus. And I don't mean to be preachy here, but that's really who I am. When my grandmother passed last, she lived in her 90s in Baltimore. I had like 3 days to clean the house up, get an estate sale and give things to the church and whatever it was I was doing. My grandfather at one point had worked on the Manhattan Project. He didn't know it, of course, what it was. And he was an oil burner guy. He used to come and put the oil in, in those big oil tanks and homes in Baltimore and Philly and, the East Coast. And I went through all these plaques that both of them have gotten in their life. And they're meaningful and they're always appreciative when someone gives you an award. But when you're gone, they don't add up to a lot. What adds up to a lot is how you treat people. It's really what you do for others. It's what you do for the kingdom. When I'm gone, they'll, like all of us, they'll attend the funeral, they'll say nice things, and a month later they get on with their lives. And that's the way it should be in life. And so I'm really not worried about my legacy. I just want to do the very best I can while I'm in office. And we've had a pretty good record on that. As you mentioned, lieutenant governors in most states have no power. They're kind of, they run on the same ticket with governors in many cases. Governor Abbott and I run separately. We're like a majority leader. When you appoint the chair of the committees, the members of the committee decide which bills come to the floor. And so we get a chance to focus on the direction of the state. And I have a great Senate. I have 31 senators, 20 Republicans. We are the majority. We rule as the majority. And I have just great people, great staff. We haven't done everything right, and we haven't finished it all, but we've done a lot of good things.
It's always unfinished business that you have to get to. So two of the things that are very, very high on your chart, if not the top priorities, we'll talk about property taxes. I want to talk about education, but property taxes, I saw this video recently where you compared everything to a Monopoly game. And by the way, I really understood it once you did it that way.
And you weren't even paying property taxes in Texas and you got it. So great.
Right. But as you came into office, the homestead exemption was at $15,000. Now you're trying to get it up to $200,000 and have it get to a place where, as you compare it to Monopoly, you're no longer paying rent your entire life. How important is that, especially to seniors, many of whom live on fixed incomes, that this is something that happens?
A long time ago when I was doing talk radio, I realized local governments and school districts could raise their taxes up to 8% without a vote. So the old rule of 72 that my dad taught me, whatever you divide in 72 doubles. So if your property taxes went up 8% a year, in 9 years, your taxes would double. And I knew that was not sustainable. I ran for the Senate on that issue. I was a senator for 8 years, but I could never get the votes to make a big change. So I ran for lieutenant governor. And as you stated, we had a $15,000 homestead exemption. So let's just simple math for people who don't live in Texas. If you have a $200,000 home, you have a $15,000 homestead exemption, where you pay taxes on $175. And then I raised it to $40. And then last session, we raised it to $100. So now if you have that $200,000 home, you're paying taxes on $100,000. So this year, we're going to raise that $100 to $140 or $50 for every homeowner. And for seniors, we're going to take it to $200,000. In Texas, that means the average senior, well over 2/3 of all seniors, will no longer pay any school taxes. It's taken a while to get there. It's expensive to do it because we have to backfill it with our sales tax dollars, in essence, converting property tax to sales tax. And this is in America today. Home ownership has gotten expensive. In 2017, Texas was committing, the legislature, of sales tax collections we get, about $3 billion to property tax. This session, we will leave there with over a $51 billion commitment to property taxes. And that's something, Adam, you have to, it's not a one-time deal. You have to do it every year. So you have to cut the property taxes, but do it in a way that you can be sure you can sustain it.
I think you said something like $84 billion is being devoted in public schools to 5 million children.
5.5 million.
5.5 million. I'm sorry to get my math right. And I did some simple math. It works out to $10,000 a student in terms of non-public schools, $15,000 for public schools. Your point was that we're putting a lot of money already into public education, and having school choice is not there to bankrupt the possibilities in the future of public education. It is there to actually to reinforce it And on top of all that, you've been a big advocate of teachers being paid what they need to be paid to be able to live the American dream and still do what we all want, which is to help teach and motivate the next generation.
Look, I'm a big proponent of public education. My wife was a school teacher, my mother-in-law, my daughter-in-law. I even got my internship at, I think, Glen Burnie High School, if I can remember. I never went on to teach, but my degree is in English. And teaching is a great profession. Keeps you young, number one. Keeps you up to date with modern culture is about, because you're dealing with kids depending on what age group. So teaching it's a noble profession, and it should not be treated as a job. It should be treated as a profession. The biggest enemy against public education, and I would say teachers in the country, is Randi Weingarten of the Teachers Union. She is the biggest enemy of public education, locking kids into failing schools year after year after year. Inner city Baltimore, inner city DC, inner city anywhere, some rural schools in the country. A long time ago, it said, 25 years ago, they asked the head of the Teachers Union then, "You don't seem to care about the kids in school." And he famously said, "When they start paying dues, I'll care about them." It should not be about the system. It should be about our kids, and it should be about those who teach our kids. So in Texas, 95% or more of our students will be in public schools. You have homeschoolers with 600,000 or 700,000. You have about 250,000 in private. And then this new school choice, the biggest launch ever of a school choice program to launch $1 billion and 100,000 kids. But again, that's my chart. We have 1,200 superintendents, 1,200 school districts in Texas, a lot. And I show them the chart. Look, you've got 5.5 million kids. We're going to have 100,000, okay, in school choice. And that may grow over time, but it's not going to threaten. That 5.5 million will be 5.8 million kids. The hate and the rhetoric from Randi against any parental choice is inexcusable. And by the way, our teacher pay, and I have been a proponent of that. In 2019, the average was 54,000. After this session, it will be 69,000 with incentive programs that can pay up to 80,000 or more for the best teachers. The teacher unions have been against every pay raise. Message to the teachers in America and in Texas: your unions are against every pay raise your legislature passes. At least I can say that for Texas, because it's never enough for them, because they can never admit that the Republicans are actually paying our teachers enough or they're funding schools enough, because they wouldn't have any reason to have existence. I don't know how much money, Randi, but she is the worst, just the worst, because she doesn't tell the truth and she doesn't care about the students.
Give me a quick update, if you don't mind, on the border. You know, you've said in the past, in terms of border security, I'm not anti-immigrant. I'm not anti-anybody. But I do take offense to the fact that people get in the back of a semi, they get to the border, they swim across a river, and then they hide in the shadows. I think those are almost your words from the past. Do you feel good about how we're now starting to really go after this? Under President Trump, there's a new ball game in town, a new sheriff in town, as they say.
And he did a great job in the first session. I became a senator in 2007. We didn't have any money in the budget for border security when I came in. And I could see the growing problem. And so I was able to get, as a freshman, I think $100 million a year in the 2-year budget. As lieutenant governor, that grew to about $800 million in my first session, because we needed that to help border security with our state police, the DPS. And then once Biden took over, that $800 million went to about $5 to $6 billion. I want you to think about that.
Wow.
$5 to $6 billion that we had to spend of our taxpayer dollars because Joe Biden wouldn't do the job. So when President Trump, you can look at the records, almost every year, about 400,000, 450,000 people were, I say, cross the border. They're the ones apprehended, okay? Our border with Mexico is longer than on the map between Atlanta and Portland, Maine. That's how big our border is. Now, it's not a straight line. It's ziggity-zag, but it's 1,254 miles. So we've spent about, I don't know, $12, $14 billion over the last several years under Biden to help America secure the border. Biden was letting in 2 million a year, but that's only the ones that came across the bridge and say, hey, we're here.
It's the only ones we know about.
Doesn't count the people we never see over those 1,250 miles. And I knew, and I said, you know, I'm on Fox quite a bit talking about the border. I said, on day one, Texas and President Trump will secure the border. And on day one, we did. All those excuses that Biden made, well, I need Congress, I need this, I need this. No, day one. And border crossings this month compared to Biden are down 99%. Or in the high 90s somewhere. I just talked to the president after we did our ceremony yesterday. I stayed behind the Oval Office for a little bit. We talked about a few things, including the border. It's incredible.
I want you to know a couple of things. One is that I've now been corrected about the Green Bay Packers, so this is good. I was a little bit concerned about that as a Baltimore Colts fan from way back. I hope you realize, and I think you're a very modest person, that your parents must be very proud of you. The people of Highlandtown must be very proud of someone who came from there and has done what you've done. The courage you've shown in doing that. You've had tests in life, challenges in life that you had to confront and deal with. In terms of your faith, it was a preseason for Christianity for you. But you right now are doing more things in a stand-up, that my actions speak for themselves way, that I think is a good example, not just for the people of Texas, but for people across the country.
I'm a long way from perfect. I'm a long way from good. Just another sinner saved by grace and doing the best we can. You know, a lot of people run for office to be someone, and a lot of people run to do something. I think there's, unfortunately, maybe more in the first category. I'm just one of those, and there are a lot of others. And I used to pray for supernatural words, wisdom, and favor every day. And I was getting ready to speak at a Christian school in the graduation announcement. And the lady that I was talking to, she said, Dan, you left out courage. She said, a lot of people pray for wisdom, but what do you do with it? You know, you pray for favor, but what do you do with it? You pray for words, but what do you do with it? I want to get something to show you as we sign off,
Please.
but I don't want you to see.
Please.
Can you see this?
Oh my God. It's Johnny Unitas. For those
That
few
is
who
autographed
don't know
jersey
what we're
up there.
looking at. Oh, look at that.
That was a model I had when I was a kid. Of course, I have a lot of Oiler memorabilia too, and Cowboys. My dad worked at the Sun paper. He was in the trucking department, but every
Yes.
then he get invited to something cool. And so in 1964, he took me to this little event, and there is Johnny Unitas and Raymond Berry's autograph.
Oh, and it's Ray Berry.
Little styrofoam football from the Skimitar Club, 1964 there.
Wow.
So there's not a better place to live in the whole planet than Texas. I love Texas. But, you know, you got to have some roots. And the real pleasure about that was I was a kid then, and Brooks Robinson was my hero.
Yeah.
And then I became a sportscaster at Channel 5. And guess what? Who I got to work with? Johnny Unitas and Brooks Robinson from time to time. They were doing play-by-play. They were doing things. And Washington, D.C. used to cover the Orioles because we didn't have a baseball team when I was there in the 70s in D.C. And so it was really cool to get them to know them as men after sports, because they were just kids, Adam, you know? They were 20-some-year-old kids, but when you're a kid, when you're 10, you look up to them as Superman. And we have those Supermen today in sports, too, that I respect.
Do you remember the film Diner?
Oh, I love the film Diner. You got to take the Colts test.
The Colts test, the Colts quiz. I just want you and everyone in America to know you just passed the test with flying colors.
Okay. Well, thank you. And my other favorite movie of Baltimore is Avalon.
Oh.
It is the story of immigrants who came here the right way.
Exactly.
Because we are a nation of immigrants. So, look, this has been a great pleasure. And I really do believe that life is like a maze. You just can't get out of it if there's not a higher power that you ask direction from. And again, you know, we're primarily a Christian nation, but people have different faiths and we respect those faiths.
Sure.
But if you don't have God in the middle of your life, man, you're going to keep bumping into the hedge. And at some point, with God in your life, he'll get you out of that maze and he'll get you where he wants you to be. You know, I played ball off the marble steps of the the Pennsylvania Pinky, throwing it against. Remember Pennsylvania Pinky?
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh, we used to play soccer on this big tarmac lot with a pinky ball, playing soccer into imaginary goals. Yeah.
I took my two grandkids, who were 9 and 7 then, to Highlandtown, and we played stickball in the street.
Stickball, sure.
In the street.
Did they like it?
Oh, they love it. And they said, Papa, you can't. The car's coming. I said, yeah, we stopped. The car's coming.
Right.
And I said, in the manhole cover is second base and home plate. And the car over there is third base, and the other car is first base. Yeah. And then we went out to Eastbrook, a little further out, my first little league field, and the field is still there. The soccer field now, covered with grass. And then I went to my other house that we moved to, and we played ball there. I wanted them to experience their roots. You know, I'll close with this. Spiro Agnew. What was that? The negative nabobs of...
The nattering nabobs of negativity.
Yeah. I don't know why Nixon picked him. I don't remember at the time why. But can you imagine today someone picking a county judge?
No.
Or a county executive to be vice president?
No. And I think what Nixon liked about Spiro, he was very much a law and order kind of Republican. And that was the time when Nixon was very, very strong about that number one issue, right? He saw that as a good partner. He saw him also as someone different, kind of cut from a different cloth, as opposed to everyone else he was used to dealing with in his political career to that point. Spiro, the real story is, because my dad was with Spiro and others at the convention, right? And the call comes in. I mean, out of the blue, Dan, the call comes in to Spiro. It's Richard Nixon. And he had to check. He said, okay, who is this really, right? No. It's Richard Nixon. and I have a very important question to ask you. And he asked him on the spot. Everyone from Spiro and others in the room were blown away. There was no setup to this. No one had speculated about this.
Wow.
No one vetted to this. They just suddenly got the call. And my dad apparently was a big speechwriter as well. He was writing the speech literally as they're walking into the convention hall. That kind of stuff you can't replace in any other way but to live it.
Agnew, if you think about him, was a little Trumpian back then for his time. There was no
my
one
God,
like
no
him.
question.
But didn't he end up getting caught taking a payoff envelope of cash?
Yeah, unfortunately, there was a system that had grown up through many generations in Maryland politics, where that kind of thing was done. And Spiro was told, no excuse, by the way, that's just the way things are done. So he ended up just saying, okay, I guess if that's what everyone's doing, that's what you do, right? He made a bad call. He listened to bad advice, but he listened to advice from people that were true, like major league players in Maryland politics. They've been doing it for a lifetime, right? And it just went astray.
Since you love political stories, I'll share this one. Then I got to go. John Connolly Jr. is a great friend. It reminded me of you. He said when he was a kid, his dad would let him listen in as long as it wasn't something he shouldn't hear on the speakerphone to calls, political calls. You know, his dad was the governor of the state of Texas. And he said when Nixon won, he called his dad and said, John, I want you to be my Treasury Secretary. And Connolly said, with John Jr. listening, Mr. President, you don't need a Democrat. That's not going to be a good look for you.
Right.
You know, we were conservative Democrat back then.
Sure.
He said, you don't need a Democrat. You should consider reaching out to George Bush,
Wow.
who had just lost
Isn't
either a
that
congressional
interesting?
race or a Senate race.
Congressional, yes.
Congressional.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, well, you know, John, you don't ever say no to the president when he asks you to do something.
Right.
Hung up the phone. A week later, he calls back. He said, I've solved your problem. I've done a little
Good word.
research on that George Bush.
Right.
I'm going to make him CIA director, and you're going to be my Treasury Secretary.
You're in a great place, as you know. And I love your motivation, by the way. You're very clear about why you're on Earth, and you're very clear about what you were trying to do in a direct but humble way. It's not out of ego. It's out of a sense of you've been given an opportunity by God. So great to have you on the show.
Sorry we didn't do it in
Can't wait.
person. I'm going to be in D.C. a lot with these hearings.
Yeah.
So we'll come by, maybe next fall, and after we've had a few hearings under our belt, and visit if you want.
Looking forward to it. You
Okay,
take care
sir.
of yourself.
Thank you. All right.